People always assume humiliation arrives with shouting. Mine arrived as a laugh. A thin, condescending little laugh from the head of the table, right before my new boss clasped his hands and announced, "Reagan, you just don't fit the future we're building." The room went still in that ugly, polite way corporate rooms do when they smell blood. A few managers froze mid-scribble. Someone coughed too loudly. No one looked directly at me, as if eye contact might get them fired too. I hadn't even finished flipping to page 2 of the operational audit, the same audit they begged me to finish over the weekend, when Madison Hale swanned in from the side like she was entering a runway. Not a meeting. She didn't sit. She didn't greet anyone. She just dropped a white envelope in front of me and pushed it with one manicured finger. "Temporary termination," she said with the cheerful cruelty of someone who'd never been held accountable for anything in her life. My throat tightened, but not the way they expected. I didn't shake. I didn't stammer. The anger didn't flare. It settled, sharp and cold, sliding into place like a blade being sheathed. Madison, 29, chairman's daughter, allergic to competence, tilted her chin as if she had personally revolutionized our compliance network. Meanwhile, I was the one who'd built the backbone they'd been coasting on for a decade, the audits that kept us from federal penalties, the routing logic that prevented 2 near disasters, the entire coordination system they still didn't understand. Yet here I was, being handed a dismissal by someone who still asked it how to reset the cloud. My fingers brushed the envelope. A few executives shifted uncomfortably, waiting for the meltdown they could whisper about later. Instead, I opened it calmly, eyes moving over the familiar legal text. One paragraph, then another, and then there it was. A line nobody else in this room even knew existed. A trigger written into an old policy update, quietly passed, never questioned, and only activated under one extremely specific condition, a condition Madison had just fulfilled. The humiliation was still burning under my skin, but beneath it, something else ignited. I lifted my eyes, met hers, and let the smallest, coldest smile form. She had no idea what she'd just set off. "How's work treating you these days? I hope you're finding a little bit of pride in what you do, even if the people around you don't always see it. If you've been sitting for a while, try standing up and taking a slow walk around the room. Your body will thank you later. Tell me where you're listening from. I'd love to know who's here sharing this moment with me. And if this story speaks to something you've lived through, stay with me, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Now, let's step into the moment right after that smile, because everything begins to shift. I should have known the moment Madison crooked her finger at me that nothing good was waiting behind that door. She didn't even bother lowering her voice, just announced to the room that she needed a private word. Like she was summoning a housekeeper, not the person who had kept this company alive for more than a decade. I followed her into the small conference room beside the break area, the kind with terrible lighting and a constant hum from the old air vent. She shut the door gently, but her smile had sharp edges. "Reagan," she began, leaning against the table like she owned gravity. "You should really be thanking me. I'm giving you a chance to leave quietly before people start asking uncomfortable questions." Her tone was syrupy, but the poison underneath was unmistakable. "Honestly, I think you're lucky." The words hit harder than I expected, not because I believed a single syllable, but because of how casually she said them, like my entire career. Every late night, every emergency only I could fix, could be dismissed with a smirk and a rehearsed line. My throat tightened until breathing felt like scraping glass. Still, I didn't answer. I just watched her, letting the silence do what my voice couldn't. She took my quiet as permission to continue. "Of course she did. I mean, this place needs fresh leadership," she said, gesturing in a wide arc as if gesturing at a kingdom. "People who understand modern systems. Not whatever it was you were doing." She laughed lightly. "Don't look so tense. You had a good run." Her words blurred for a moment as memories shoved their way back. Nights I slept under my desk during a security failure. Mornings, I arrived before sunrise to fix a routing collapse. Weekends, I spent rebuilding compliance reports no one else understood. I remembered the fear in the COO's voice the night our audit logs corrupted, and the entire system teetered. "Reagan, if you don't fix this, we're done." I had fixed it in 4 hours. They always came to me when things were on fire. Then they forgot the moment the flames went out. I refocused just in time to hear Madison brag. "I'm going to overhaul this outdated infrastructure. Start completely fresh." She looked proud, triumphant even. She didn't realize the entire system she insulted was running on licenses tied directly legally to my name. She didn't know that every compliance trigger, every routing protocol, every audit shield existed because I had built them from scratch. She didn't even know which parts she depended on most. Then she opened her tablet, turning the screen toward me with a flourish. "By the way, I've reassigned all admin credentials, streamlining the hierarchy. Everything runs through me now." That single sentence nearly stole my breath, because in her eagerness to erase me, she had crossed a boundary she didn't understand, one that wasn't corporate, but federal. I saw the violation immediately, a restricted access chain transferred without the required dual authorization. Her mistake wasn't just reckless, it was illegal. I finally lifted my eyes to hers, and for the first time all morning, the anger eased just enough for something sharper to slip through. She had no idea the trap she'd sprung on herself. I returned to my desk expecting awkward glances or forced sympathy, the usual aftershock of a public humiliation. Instead, what I found was worse. Because it didn't shout, it whispered. My workstation lit up with a blankness I had never seen before. Not a single file, not a single reference, not even a trace of my username. It was as if the system had swallowed me whole and decided I'd never existed. My internal profile account not recognized. The compliance library? No permissions found. The audit log archive, my archive, displayed a message that felt almost taunting. "This directory is empty. Empty." The directory I'd built line by line. The coldness inside me tightened another notch. I wasn't being phased out. I was being erased. Erasure requires intent, not incompetence, which meant Madison had moved faster than I expected, and she'd done it with the kind of reckless confidence only people protected by last names, not merit, ever learn to possess. I tried one more system just to see how deep the purge went. The routing control panel blinked a single response. Insufficient rights. Insufficient rights. For the architecture that literally bore my signature in the licensing chain. I shut the company laptop carefully, almost gently, the way you might close a door out of respect for a room you're never returning to. Then I pulled out my personal laptop, the device no one in this building could access or manipulate. It booted up without friction, and for the first time that morning, something in me steadied. My inbox refreshed, and sitting at the top was a message marked "Urgent, verification required." The sender, David Rourke, Federal Compliance Officer for our operational sector, a man known for dry humor, relentless accuracy, and a remarkable tolerance for bureaucratic chaos as long as people didn't lie to him. We had worked together for 9 years. He trusted my work the same way a pilot trusts the ground crew. Quietly, completely, I opened his message. "Reagan, we received a system update from your company this morning. Your signature is missing from the authorization chain. This is irregular. Please advise." My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. Instead, everything inside me went very still, like a lake before a storm. That stillness wasn't calm. It was clarity. Madison hadn't just tried to humiliate me. She had impersonated me on a federal document. She had violated an authorization protocol governed by federal oversight, and she had done so with all the subtlety of a brick through glass. I reread David's message slowly. He wasn't suspicious of me. He was alert, the kind of alert that precedes something official, something with teeth. All he needed was confirmation of what he already sensed. For years, I was the one who prevented mistakes like this. I caught missing signatures, mismatched timestamps, unauthorized revisions. I had patched their sloppiness so thoroughly that leadership never realized how close they came time and time again to triggering audits that could have crippled us. But today, I wasn't shielding anyone. I opened the compliance submission portal on my personal machine, verifying what I already knew. The digital fingerprint on the update wasn't mine. The metadata had been overwritten, but not well. A competent analyst could have buried the evidence. Madison wasn't competent. She was ambitious and sloppy, an extremely dangerous combination. The pieces aligned with painful clarity. She had rushed the update, used her newly stolen admin credentials, and assumed the federal regulators wouldn't notice a missing signature. But signatures aren't optional in my chain. They are mandatory, legally binding, and entirely non-transferable. I placed my fingers over the keyboard. There was no need for outrage, no dramatic speech, no attempt to soften the blow. David didn't want a story. He wanted the truth. I typed 4 words. I did not sign. I read them once, twice, then pressed send. The email disappeared from my screen. And in that quiet second afterward, I felt the shift, the unmistakable click of a process beginning. One that could not be stopped, reversed, or sweet-talked away. A federal investigation had just been triggered, and Madison had no idea she had lit the fuse herself. Observant viewers will notice something unusual here. What about you? The first hint that my 4-word email had landed exactly where it needed to came an hour later, when my phone buzzed with a message containing nothing but a screenshot federal inquiry, missing authorization signature. The sender wasn't identified, but the formatting told me everything. Only one person in that building used all-cap subject lines when she panicked. Madison! I imagined her sitting in her glass-walled office, perfectly curled hair beginning to wilt as she stared at a question she couldn't answer. Why was the required signature from Reagan Cole missing nothing? Warms a bruised ego, quite like karma showing up early for its shift. I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang next, an unfamiliar extension from the company. I let it buzz twice before answering. Her voice came on all bright and airy, the way people sound when they're trying to hide the smell of smoke behind them. Reagan High. The forced cheerfulness almost made me laugh. Almost. We have a tiny paperwork hiccup on our end. Totally routine stuff. I was wondering if you could swing by the office and take care of a missing signature. There it was, the bag hidden under the pretend casual tone. I kept my voice smooth. I'm not available today. A sharp inhale broke through her varnished composure. Well, when are you available? I'll let you know. I hung up before she could fake another smile at me. The truth was, I had no intention of returning. And she knew it. But desperation does strange things to arrogant people. Madison must have assumed that if she spoke sweetly enough. I'd forget she had erased me from the company like old data. As I set my phone down, another message came, in this one from a partner we'd worked with for years. Reagan, please confirm the new system update. We cannot proceed without your authorization. Ah, beautiful. This wasn't Madison's world anymore. It was the world I built, one where my signature wasn't a courtesy, but a legal necessity. And apparently, word of the missing signature was spreading faster than she realized. By noon, 3 more partners reached out, all asking the same thing: is the update valid? Are we cleared to continue running the system without my confirmation? The compliance protocols they relied on remained frozen. Not malfunctioning, frozen by design. My design, somewhere in her office. Madison was probably pacing in circles, trying to figure out why the outdated legacy system she mocked refused to acknowledge her authority. The image was almost therapeutic. Then came the second call from her. This time, she didn't bother with sweetness. Reagan, listen to me, she hissed, voice low and shaky. You need to fix this. Our partners are confused, and you're making things worse. I leaned back in my chair, letting the satisfaction settle. I don't have the authority to make anything worse. Remember, I'm a nobody now. Your words. There was a pause thick enough to cut. Then she snapped. You are a nobody. You don't have any power here anymore. If she believed that, she wouldn't have called twice. Before I could respond, Another email alert popped up, this one from a major partner whose compliance tolerance was less forgiving than the others. They wrote, "Until we receive confirmation from Reagan Cole, we must suspend all system operations." That was the moment I decided to stop playing defense. I opened a blank message and drafted a notice addressed to every single partner tied to our system. The wording was simple, clean, and impossible to misinterpret, crafted with the precision of someone who had written hundreds of compliance directives. Please pause system usage until the required signature is properly verified. I hit send. Across the city, across servers, across departments, the message deployed like a quiet truth bomb. Somewhere inside that pristine office tower, Madison Hale realized the one thing she had never bothered to learn: control isn't given, it's engineered. And I was the engineer by the next morning. The consequences of that missing signature had begun unfolding right on schedule. Not loudly, not dramatically, more like cracks spreading across glass, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. Our system detected the unverified update and did what it was programmed to do: shift into safe stop mode. Safe stop wasn't a malfunction. It wasn't even a problem. It was a safeguard I built years ago for situations exactly like this. If any required authorization was missing, the entire compliance chain froze to prevent illegal processing. The company had always relied on that protection without realizing it. By 8:30, the first report started trickling in: the compliance dashboard isn't responding. The risk assessment API won't generate outputs. The access provisioning queue is stuck. Stuck. Of course it was stuck. When SafeStop activated, nothing moved. No reports, no approvals, no permissions. The company had effectively locked itself in a room with no key, and the only person who knew where the key was had been erased the day before. I sipped my coffee while I read the frantic messages forwarded to my personal email by the few coworkers who still had a spine. The panic was predictable, the confusion even more so. Then came the part I had been waiting for. The company called in the internal technical team, then the senior developers, then 2 external contractors. They tore through logs, dug through modules, and attempted to bypass automation layers they didn't understand. But my architecture wasn't something you worked around. It was something you respected, or it turned on you. The messages from inside the building got increasingly desperate. Who wrote this logic? This isn't standard configuration. Does anyone know what these encryption flags mean? No one did. And the people who once pretended they didn't need me were now begging for answers they couldn't find. That realization should have made me angry. Instead, I felt nothing but a cold, steady clarity. Madison, predictably, lost her composure first. She marched into the operations war room, at least according to the flurry of texts I received blaming everyone within arm's reach. "This is your fault," she snapped at the senior analyst. "No, you should have checked that module," she barked at the engineer. "Why wasn't this flagged earlier? Why can't any of you fix this?" Her meltdown spread like wildfire. Half the team was terrified. The other half was quietly amused. And above it all, floating like a storm cloud waiting to burst, was the CEO's growing suspicion. He called an emergency meeting. I didn't need to be there to know how it went. I'd seen this pattern too many times. First comes confusion, then comes fear, then comes the inevitable question: why didn't Madison notice this before pushing the update? I pictured her scrambling to come up with an answer that didn't expose her incompetence. There wasn't one. Not a single plausible explanation she could offer, without revealing she had overstepped in ways that violated both protocol and federal regulations. While the company spiraled, I opened my personal laptop and accessed the remote monitoring tool I had intentionally kept for myself, not out of distrust, but out of practicality. The system's skeleton had always been my responsibility. I wasn't about to give up visibility after being pushed out. The live logs loaded slowly. Then the anomalies began to appear. Someone inside the company was trying to break into a restricted subsystem, one that wasn't tied to any employee credential, but mine. The attempts were clumsy, repetitive, almost frantic. A brute force attack from someone who didn't understand the architecture well enough to realize they were attacking an encrypted dead end. I traced the login attempts. The origin was unmistakable. Madison! She was trying to hack her way into the only piece of the system she had never touched, never understood, and never earned the right to access. A small, cold smile formed before I even realized it. SafeStop hadn't been the real problem. The real problem was that Madison was now fighting a system built to protect itself from people exactly like her. There was something in the back that no one expected. By early afternoon, Madison finally broke her silence, but not in a way that suggested responsibility or competence. Instead, she blasted a company-wide announcement with the confidence of someone who still believed the building revolved around her. The system is experiencing issues due to legacy technical structures. She wrote, "Legacy technical structures?" I stared at the phrase so long, I almost convinced myself I had misread it. But no, the words were there, dripping with blame, polished with denial. She was pointing the finger not at her forged signature, not at her illegal system update, not at her frantic hacking attempt, but at the very architecture that had protected the company for years. I couldn't help it. I laughed, out loud. A short, sharp sound I didn't even try to muffle. Her message wasn't just wrong. It was pathetic. It was the kind of excuse people make when they're not trying to fix a problem, just trying to outrun the truth before it catches them. And in Madison's case, the truth was sprinting. Within minutes, I heard from former coworkers who still had my personal number. Apparently, Madison had stormed into the operations room again, waving her tablet like a torch. "We're handling it," she insisted. "Everything is under control." But the cracks in her confidence were visible even through second-hand descriptions. She kept clearing her throat, kept checking the hallway, kept glancing at her phone. She was desperate for a lifeline and too proud to admit she didn't have one. Meanwhile, I sat on my couch, laptop open, watching the chaos unfold through remote logs like a distant storm I'd chosen not to stop. Not yet. Then my phone rang. Not from the company, not from a coworker, but from the number of our largest partner, the one whose data made up nearly a third of the company's revenue. I hadn't spoken to him directly in months, yet he was calling my personal phone like it was the most natural thing in the world. I answered. "This is Reagan." His voice was tight, strained. "We're hearing reports your system has been compromised. Are you still protecting our data?" There it was. The question Madison didn't want anyone to ask, and the question only I could answer. I could have stalled. I could have redirected. I could have played the powerless ex-employee. But I had no intention of letting Madison twist the narrative while federal regulations trembled in the background. "Yes," I said calmly. "Your data is safe, and I will send you an official report in the morning." Silence stretched across the line, relief mixed with something else. Trust, the kind that couldn't be stolen, deleted, or reassigned. "Thank you, Reagan," he finally said. We knew something was off. Of course he did. Partners always sensed instability long before executives admitted it. When the call ended, I leaned back and let the weight of what I'd just done settle. With one sentence. I had forced a crack wide open. Because partners don't keep concerns to themselves, they escalate. They document. They report. And anything reported in writing eventually reaches federal oversight. I didn't have to wait long. Right on cue. My email pinged. A message from federal compliance. Not a gentle check-in this time, but a flagged inquiry. "We have received notification of potential unauthorized access. Please confirm your morning report will include full system details." Translation, they were stepping in. And Madison. She had no idea the ground beneath her was already dissolving. I closed my laptop slowly, savoring the moment. The company thought they'd erased me. Madison thought she'd replaced me. The CEO thought he could ignore me, but the partners, the regulators, the system itself, they still knew exactly who I was. And by morning, everyone else would too. By the time the sun started dropping behind the office towers, The building that once treated me like background noise had erupted into full-blown chaos. Not the loud, dramatic kind, this was the quiet, suffocating kind that spreads through walls and hallways like smoke. People were running reports that wouldn't run, calling departments that couldn't answer, and refreshing dashboards that stayed stubbornly blank. Every system was stuck in safe stop. Every partner was demanding clarity, and every question pointed back to the same missing signature. Mine. And then the inevitable happened. The CEO received a letter, an official, federally stamped notice requiring him to provide the original physical signature from Reagan Cole within 24 hours. Not a scanned copy, not a typed acknowledgement. The original. The one they believed still sat in some locked cabinet or archived folder. It didn't. Madison had never asked for it because she didn't know it existed. Witnesses later told me the CEO read the letter 3 times before his face drained of color. He stormed out of his office and demanded Madison appear in the executive conference room immediately. She walked in confidently, still clinging to the belief that charm, excuses, and a last name could fix anything. For the first time since she'd arrived at the company, someone actually raised their voice at her. "What did you do?" the CEO snapped. His fist hit the table hard enough that pens scattered. "You pushed a system update without the authorized signature." "Do you have any idea what kind of violation that is?" Madison faltered, then defaulted to her favorite strategy, blaming me. "Reagan is doing this to make me look bad," she said, crossing her arms. "She's causing trouble on purpose. She wants to sabotage us." The CEO stared at her as if she'd spoken in a language he'd never heard. "Sabotage," he repeated slowly. "Why would she sabotage the system she designed?" Madison hesitated for half a second too long. Then came the real question, the one she wasn't prepared for. "Why?" the CEO asked, leaning forward. "Is the entire system built around her signature?" Madison blinked. "Because it's old. Something she wrote years ago. Some old code lines. I was planning to modernize it." Wrong answer. Spectacularly wrong answer. The CEO's jaw tightened. Old code lines. Madison. She was the senior architect. She built the core compliance and audit infrastructure we still depend on. You didn't know that she looked away. Well, she never explained it. She didn't need to explain it. The CEO's voice cracked with disbelief. That was her job. And you replaced her without understanding a single piece of her work. Silence filled the room thick. Humiliating. Irreversible. While they were unraveling inside that glass room, I sat at home with my laptop open, monitoring the back-end logs and watching the dominoes fall exactly where logic said they would. Panic produces mistakes, and tonight's attempt to bypass the federal requirement would be no exception. At nearly 11:45, my phone lit up with the CEO's number. I didn't need to answer to know what the conversation would be. The tone would be polite but desperate. He'd apologize without fully admitting fault. He'd insist the situation was complicated. He'd ask if I could stop by tomorrow morning just to clarify a few items, to smooth things out, to help the company through a rough patch he created, a disaster she triggered, a consequence they earned. The call rang, and rang, then went silent. 2 minutes later, he tried again. This time, voicemail. I didn't pick up, not because I was being dramatic, not because I wanted revenge, but because some lines, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. They chose arrogance over expertise, perception over performance, ego over logic. They wanted a future without me. Now they were standing in it, and for the first time since the day began, I felt the faintest hint of something almost like closure as the phone stopped buzzing and the building behind it continued collapsing under the weight of its own choices. The next morning, I woke to the kind of silence that tells you something catastrophic has already happened. Not a single call from the company, not a single message from anyone trying to pretend things were under control. That alone was suspicious. They always called when they wanted cover, and they always called me. But this time, nothing. I opened my personal laptop and checked the system logs. Expecting the usual frantic scraping from Madison's failed attempts to bypass authorization, what I saw instead was far more entertaining. She had finally snapped. Sometime around 3 in the morning, Madison had attempted the one thing I always prayed no one in leadership would be reckless enough to try. She manually disabled the coal lock layer, the licensing shield tied to my identity, and my federal credentials, the layer that protected every regulated module in our architecture, the layer explicitly labeled "Do not override without authorization." She ignored all of it. She pressed the button anyway. I laughed, not a warm laugh, but the kind that escapes when disbelief and vindication collide. Coal lock wasn't designed to punish anyone. It was designed to keep the company legal. Turning it off didn't give Madison control. It released the exact opposite. The moment she disabled it, the system didn't congratulate her. It retaliated. Automatically, predictably. First, access control froze. Then, the compliance queues stalled. Then, the audit layers crashed, one after another, like lights going out in a hallway, by sunrise. The entire company was standing in pitch-black operational silence. Partners couldn't log in. Weekly reports refused to generate. Data streams that had run flawlessly for years suddenly shut down mid-process. The first external alert hit at 7:15. We are unable to access our account. 5 minutes later, report submission failed. System unresponsive. 10 minutes after that, our compliance deadlines are in jeopardy. Explain immediately! I pictured Madison in her office, hair frizzy, voice cracking, palms sweaty, pretending she wasn't the arsonist holding the match. Sure enough, she called in the IT department with a tone that must have teetered between hysteria and command. One of my old co-workers texted me. She's screaming about restoring admin privileges. Everything's locked. Every request loops back to your signature. Good. That was exactly how coal lock was meant to behave when a violation occurred. The system didn't panic, it protected itself. All pathways led back to the original architect. To prevent fraud, to prevent illegal activity, to prevent incompetence. Every technician who tried to force access hit the same automated response. Only the authorized owner may approve this request. Only the authorized owner may override this lock. Only the authorized owner may restore this function. Owner Reagan Cole. Not Madison, not the CEO, not any contractor they brought in to clean up her mess, and because she had erased me from the employee registry. The system didn't even recognize her existence in the approval hierarchy, from the system's perspective. She was nothing more than a civilian trying to tamper with federal regulated infrastructure. Reports flooded my inbox faster than I could scroll. Our dashboards froze. The data upload halted. The entire week's workflow is stalled. What is happening inside your company? I didn't answer. Not yet. The tension needed to build, and it was building beautifully tight. Sharp. A wire pulled too far. At 8:30, the CEO finally dragged Madison into the IT war room, demanding answers she didn't have. She blamed the system. She blamed my outdated designs. She blamed phantom bugs and theoretical glitches. But nothing she invented could escape the truth reflected in every employee's monitor. The system wasn't broken. It was protecting itself from her. I refreshed the logs one more time to track Madison's most recent attempts to claw back control. Dozens of failed entries, multiple blocked overrides, and finally, an error code I hadn't seen triggered in years. Unauthorized attempt detected. Report filed to federal oversight. And that explained why. At precisely 9:06, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in a long time. Not the company, not a partner, a federal attorney. I stared at the screen for a second, letting the tension settle, letting the irony breathe. Madison wanted control. Instead, she had summoned the law, and now the consequences were no longer optional. The federal attorney didn't waste time with pleasantries. The moment I answered, he introduced himself, confirmed my identity, and informed me that a federal compliance officer was requesting an emergency meeting. Not optional. Not when you have a moment. Immediate. I agreed. Of course. I had been waiting for this step ever since Madison faked my signature, and I walked into that virtual meeting not as a disgruntled ex-employee, but as the only person in the state who understood the system they were about to investigate. When the video loaded, Officer David Rourke appeared on screen, posture stiff, tone clipped. Reagan. Thank you for joining on short notice. We need to discuss several irregularities tied to your company's recent system update. Irregularities. That was the polite legal term for the disaster Madison created. I didn't waste his time. I pulled up my folder of documentation, everything I'd collected since the moment Madison erased my account. Officer Rourke, I said calmly. I have evidence showing the update was submitted without authorization. My signature was forged, and multiple parts of the system were altered without approval. Then I shared my screen. First, screenshots of the forged authorization trail. Second, logs showing Madison using admin credentials she was never permitted to access. Third, timestamps proving she attempted to override restricted layers, triggering federal alerts. Fourth, internal emails where she insisted she had full control and was modernizing outdated modules. Despite having zero documented training, David's expression didn't change. But his silence did. It sharpened. Reagan, he said finally, voice tightening. This is substantial. We'll need to escalate. 2 minutes later, he invited 2 more federal analysts into the meeting, then 3, then a supervisor. What started as a routine inquiry turned into a formal investigation before my eyes. By the end of the call, the entire company, every department, every system, every executive had been placed under federal review. It was bigger than Madison now. This was structural. The CEO was notified within the hour. I know that because he immediately attempted to schedule a clarity meeting with the officers, hoping to smooth everything over with charm, corporate buzzwords, and selective truth. But charm can't fix forged signatures. Buzzwords can't reverse illegal overrides. Selective truth collapses fast under actual evidence. I didn't attend that meeting, but I received updates from people who did. The CEO tried to explain that the system was complex, that legacy structures created confusion, and that the company was already working to correct minor errors. He avoided specifics. He avoided my name. Until Madison opened her mouth. She interrupted him in front of the entire federal panel. This is all Reagan's fault, she snapped. She's manipulating the system from outside the company. She wants revenge because she's upset about her reassignment. The room went quiet. Then one of the federal analysts asked, Are you suggesting Ms. Cole has unauthorized access to internal systems? Yes, Madison insisted. She's doing this on purpose. But that's the problem with lying to people who read logs for a living. Officer Rourke simply shared the screen containing the system access history. There has been no remote intrusion, he said coolly. The only unauthorized access came from inside your building, originating from your device. Ms. Hale! The silence afterward lasted long enough to make even the CEO uncomfortable. He tried to pivot. Let's look at the bigger picture. Reagan may have had outdated processes. I cut him off before he could dig a deeper hole. I forwarded another set of documents to the panel internal emails showing Madison's attempts to rewrite audit structures, evidence of her deleting my employee record, and logs of her midnight override attempt that triggered the federal alert. The CEO's face reportedly went pale. Officer Rourke leaned back, observing all of this with the calm of someone who'd seen corporate disasters unfold many times before. Then he asked the question that turned the entire room inside out. Before we proceed, he said, does your company understand who legally owns the licensing rights for your entire operational system? The CEO started to answer, then stopped, then blinked, because for the first time since Madison arrived, he realized there was a layer of this crisis he hadn't even considered, and none of it belonged to Madison. It belonged to me. The downfall didn't start with shouting. It started with silence, a thick, stunned silence that spread across 3 major corporate campuses the moment their login screens froze and displayed the same message, awaiting signature from Reagan Cole. 3 companies, 3 multi-million-dollar contracts, 3 operations now paralyzed because the person they tried to erase was the only one allowed to authenticate the system. They didn't call the CEO. They didn't call Madison. They called me. The first partner's voice shook with impatience. "Reagan, we need your signature, or we halt operations." The second was harsher. "If you're out, this entire contract collapses." The third didn't bother hiding his anger. "Your former company claims you're unavailable. Is that true? Unavailable?" A polite way of saying fired and deleted. I had never heard the word sound so fragile. Within an hour, the CEO realized something irreversible had snapped. He summoned the board for an emergency meeting, hoping somehow that if he sat everyone at the same table, the disaster would stop spreading. The boardroom filled with the usual expensively dressed panic-loosened ties, trembling fingers, whispered accusations. Their faces carried the unmistakable look of people who had just glimpsed the edge of a cliff they pretended didn't exist. Madison was already there when the CEO arrived. Her confidence wobbling, but not fully collapsed. She launched into her performance with the desperation of someone clinging to a narrative that was falling apart in her hands. "This is just a glitch," she insisted. "Old code Reagan wrote is malfunctioning. Once we reboot the legacy system, everything will go back to normal." Normal. The word hung in the air like a bad joke. Some board members exchanged looks concerned, skeptical, irritated. Others whispered about what the partners had demanded. They wanted my authorization. Not Madison's, not the CEO's, mine. The CEO tried to soften the blow. "Look, let's not overreact. The partners are just being cautious. We can." But he didn't get the chance to finish. A board member cut in sharply. "They won't proceed without Reagan Cole." They said it directly. That comment shattered whatever illusion Madison still had left. "If she shows up here," Madison snapped, "she'll undermine me. She'll derail everything I've built. She is not allowed in this room. I'm still running this transition." Transition! That was her word for the mess she created. She didn't know that while she was busy pretending to lead. The partners had escalated their concerns to federal regulators, and the regulators did not appreciate signatures disappearing or systems being manipulated. So when she announced that I was barred from attending the meeting, she believed she had control again. She believed authority was something she could enforce with her voice alone. She had no idea what was waiting outside the room. The board continued arguing, voices rising, fear bleeding through every sentence. One investor talked about withdrawing. Another warned that compliance violations could void their contracts entirely. The CEO massaged his temples like the headache alone might kill him. And just as the room reached peak chaos, just as Madison slammed her hand on the table and insisted, "Reagan Cole will not step into this meeting," the doors opened. The room fell silent. Standing there, crisp suit, badge visible, expression unreadable, was Officer David Rourke from Federal Compliance. He didn't wait for permission to speak. He didn't acknowledge Madison's frantic glare. He didn't even sit down. He simply said, "This meeting cannot continue without Ms. Reagan Cole present." The CEO froze. The board froze. Madison's face drained of color so fast, she looked translucent. And in that single sentence, from a man whose authority outranked everyone at that table, the balance of power shifted completely. They wanted control. They wanted a future without me. But the system, the partners, the regulators, they all knew the truth. This crisis didn't end without me. It didn't move forward without me. And now, it couldn't even begin without me. The hallway outside the boardroom buzzed with whispers when I arrived. But the moment the doors opened for me, the noise evaporated. The entire room went still. 20 executives, 3 partners, the CEO, 2 attorneys, and Madison frozen at the head of the table like someone had yanked the power cord from her spine. I walked in calmly, not triumphant, not angry, just steady, like someone finally stepping into a place they should have been standing all along. Officer Rourke nodded once, signaling for me to take the empty seat across from Madison. She flinched as if the chair itself were a threat. The CEO cleared his throat, desperate to recover authority he no longer had. Reagan, thank you for joining. We're experiencing some misunderstandings regarding the system. Perhaps you can clarify. No, I said quietly. We're not dealing with misunderstandings. We're dealing with violations. The room tightened around that word. I set down the binder I had brought neat. Organized. Lethal. Let me summarize the situation so there is no confusion. I opened to the first tab. First, the company has violated federal operational requirements by submitting a system update without my mandatory signature. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Second, I continued, Madison Hale accessed authorization layers she was never approved to touch, used my credentials without permission, and altered federally regulated workflows. Every eye in the room swung sharply toward her. Her jaw clenched so hard the muscles twitched. Third, I said, flipping to the next tab. Those changes went unchecked because of a complete failure of executive oversight. I looked directly at the CEO. Your lack of supervision is documented in every access log from the moment Madison attempted her override. Color left his face in slow, painful waves. And finally, I said, placing the last folder on the table, the entire system, including all compliance layers, audit logs, encryption pathways, and licensing rights, belongs to me. Legally, contractually, and indisputably. Silence. Dead. Absolute silence. The partners were the first to react. One pushed back his chair, stood, and addressed the CEO with a voice that carried the weight of a failing empire. We cannot do business with a company that allows unauthorized access to federal systems. We require immediate removal of the individual responsible, another partner added, and we will only continue our contracts if Reagan Cole signs as the independent system controller. A third partner nodded. If she declines, we walk. It was not a request. It was a verdict. The boardroom fractured, executives whispering, lawyers scrambling, the CEO sinking into his chair like a man realizing he might lose everything in one afternoon. But the loudest reaction came from Madison. She lurched to her feet, voice cracking under the weight of panic. You can't do this. You can't hand everything to her. The company will die if she takes control. Her desperation ricocheted off the walls, high-pitched and raw. I met her eyes and held her stare, calm as a locked door. No, Madison, the company dies because of what you did. She shook her head violently. You don't understand. Without me, without you. I interrupted. The system would still be stable. Without you. There would be no federal inquiry. Without you. Thousands of employees wouldn't be frozen out of their jobs. And without you, 3 major partners wouldn't be preparing to terminate their contracts. Each sentence struck her like a hammer. She stumbled backward into her chair. I closed the binder, the sound sharp and final. This isn't revenge. This is accountability. Actions have consequences. Even for you. Officer Rourke stepped forward, adding the final blow. The board will need to deliberate, but under federal guidelines. Ms. Hale must be removed from all system access effective immediately. Her face twisted, not angry now, but terrified. That was when the CEO finally spoke. Voice hollow. Madison, please surrender your badge. The empire she thought she controlled had just crumbled beneath her feet. And for the first time since this entire mess began. Justice wasn't a theory, it was happening in real time. Exactly where it belonged, in the days that followed. Everything unfolded with the slow, undeniable rhythm of justice finally catching up. The federal review concluded faster than anyone expected, and the report landed like a hammer. Compliance ruled that the company had committed multiple violations, including unauthorized system access, falsified signatures, and illegal modification of regulated infrastructure. The penalty was brutal, millions of dollars in fines, payable immediately for years. They treated my work as invisible. Now they were paying for every piece of it. The partners didn't wait for the dust to settle. They called me directly, personally, not as an employee, but as someone who held the expertise they trusted more than any department inside that building. Reagan. One of them said during our call, "We want to move forward with you, not your former employer." By the end of the week, all three companies signed brand new contracts with the consulting firm I had formally registered just 2 days earlier. Reagan Cole Consulting. Simple, professional, mine. Ironically, the more control I gained, the less noise I felt inside me. No anger, no bitterness, just a quiet, level satisfaction. Like watching a storm pass and realizing you survived it by knowing exactly where to stand. The company, meanwhile, was unraveling thread by thread. Madison was terminated on the spot following the board's vote, her badge voided, her access revoked, her name wiped from every committee she once bragged about leading. The CEO was placed on indefinite suspension, pending further investigation into oversight failures. The boardroom, once filled with posturing and politics, now carried the heavy silence of consequences. 2 days after the investigation closed, I received an invitation gold embossed, unnecessarily formal, to meet with the board. I went, mostly out of curiosity. They greeted me with forced smiles, expensive coffee, and apologies rehearsed too many times. Then they delivered their offer. "Reagan, we'd like you to return as Executive Director of Systems Architecture. Compensation would be 4 times your previous salary." 4 times? The number was generous, flattering, even. But stepping back into the building that erased me felt like rewinding a tape I'd already watched enough. I didn't want to return to fix their mistakes. I wanted to build something that was mine, answer to no one, and choose who I worked with, not who tolerated me. So I declined. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I'm moving in a different direction. Independent consulting suits me." Their disappointment filled the room like a draft. But for once, I didn't absorb any of it. I walked out lighter than I'd walked in. That evening, just as the sun dropped behind the skyline, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I answered anyway. Reagan Madison's voice, small, cracked, stripped of every ounce of arrogance. I'm calling to apologize. Everything that happened, I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I hope someday you can forgive me." I let a long breath settle into the moment. Not angry, not triumphant, just centered. "It's okay." "Madison," I said softly. "Really?" She exhaled in relief, clearly thinking I was about to absolve her of everything. Then I added, with a smile she couldn't see but would feel, "You just weren't the right fit for my future." The line went quiet, and for the first time since this entire ordeal began, I felt something simple, something clean victory, earned the right way. I'm glad you stayed with me all the way to the end, because this story taught me something simple. When people try to erase you, your work will speak louder than their intentions. Was there a moment that struck you the most? I'd love to hear it. And tell me, where are you listening from right now? Your voice matters here. If this journey moved you even a little, feel free to leave a comment, tap like, share the story with someone who needs it, and join the channel so we can keep walking through these moments together. 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 These moments together.